Environmentalism has all the hallmarks of a left-wing cause. The enlightened vanguard, the fight against big corporations, the endless virtue signalling, the youthful warrior, which makes it a hard one for conservatives to espouse. Those on the right will tell you it's about calmer things, conservation, safeguarding resources, equilibrium. But the battle to convince voters that conservatives are the natural champions of green issues will be an uphill one. That starts tomorrow, when the government releases a 25-year plan on the environment. It includes one to eliminate all avoidable plastic waste by the end of 2042, by which time the Prime Minister would be, excuse the detail, 86 years old. Is there anything more radical in it? We'll find that out tomorrow. Will it really stand a chance of making anyone think this is a subject close to the Tory heart? We'll debate in a moment with Stanley Johnson, whose latest encounter with all things green was in the Australian jungle. He's also written extensively on the environment, and with Caroline Lucas, Britain's only Green MP. First, isn't it what?
Ugly, terrifying, and with heart-rending results, our oceans are being menaced by the modern, disposable consumer age.
Plastic. Now, every year, we dump around 8 million tonnes of it into the sea.
The blight of plastic waste will be condemned tomorrow by Theresa May as one of the great environmental scourges of our time. An unlikely coalition of the voice of Middle England and environmental activists has helped to inspire the central element of the government's 25-year plan for the environment. No doubt, with an eye on winning over younger voters, Theresa May will pledge to eliminate all avoidable plastic waste by 2042, urge supermarkets to introduce plastic-free aisles with loose food on display, extend the 5p charge for plastic carrier bags in England to all retailers, increase funding for plastics innovation to improve recycling, and use UK aid to help developing nations tackle pollution and reduce plastic waste. The management of land will also be addressed in the speech as Theresa May highlights the creation of a new forest in the north of England. The Prime Minister will also talk about how people can be better connected with the environment. I'm in the Chilterns, the beautiful rolling hills on the outskirts of London, which lie at the heart of the government's dilemma in protecting the environment whilst promoting economic growth. Behind me is Chequers, the Prime Minister's official country residence, which she uses for walks in this area. Over there and over that hill is the planned HS2 high-speed rail link to the north of England, which is being fiercely resisted by residents here who say that it threatens this area of outstanding natural beauty. The tension between the economy and environment was put to the Prime Minister in the Commons today by a Chilterns MP. It's an issue felt keenly by this local farmer, who also complains about mixed messages down the decades from Whitehall.
It's definitely a dilemma, and it's been a dilemma going on like that for generations. I could point you back into the 60s when it was government policy to pull hedges out. Well, ever since the late 70s, it's been government policy to plant hedges. It was never a farmer's idea to pull them out, but it was government policy, and we were told to do it. So, decisions need to be made with good, sound information and knowledge, and not on the sort of a whim, as it were.
The central challenge for Theresa May in this speech is to reclaim the environment for the Tories, who admit that they've had a mixed record in recent decades in promoting their green credentials. But the Prime Minister will say that preserving resources lies at the heart of Conservative principles, preserving the public finances to ensure debt is not passed on to future generations, and preserving natural resources to ensure that this generation leaves the planet in a better condition for future generations.
This is about reusing, recycling, and minimising the amount of natural resources that we're using. It comes down to a very fundamental Conservative philosophy. What sort of attracted me to the Conservative Party originally, it's about stewardship. It's about doing stuff today that we may, in our lifetime, never see the benefit of, but others will. And it's that long-term view That's why I like the idea of a generation this generation for the first time leaves the state of the environment in a better state than that which we found it.
The problem is it often comes far too late, and they will spend a very, very long time poo-pooing the science about whether the destruction of the environment is happening or not, and often they act after public opinion has finally swayed, and indeed after the environmental damage has happened. So if the Conservative Party really wants to earn some green credentials, it has to be a lot more proactive about tackling these issues before the environmental damage occurs.
In rural areas, life can sometimes move at a sedate pace, but the passion stirred on how to protect our environment only become more heated with time.
Nick Watt there. Well, I'm joined now by two of the leading lights of the environmental movement. Stanley Johnson's a former Conservative MEP and has been an environmental campaigner for over 50 years. Caroline Lucas is co-leader of the Green Party and the party's only MP. Very nice to have you both here. Caroline, if I start with you, is there anything from what you've seen so far that you disagree with? This action on plastics, new trees, farmers' subsidies based on what they give back. There's very little that you disagree with, I'm assuming.
There's little I disagree with so far. Of course, the devil will be in the detail and whether or not there's real legislative weight behind the kinds of proposals that we're hearing. So what we need to see in the plan tomorrow, for example, is a real commitment to an Environment Act, which is the thing that would actually make sure that all of these aspirations are properly turned into policy. Because don't forget, we've been here before with the Conservatives adopting a nice green sheen. We had David Cameron hugging his huskies, but then a few years later, when he was actually in office, he went from hugging huskies to culling badgers and talking about green crap. So we know that there's a detoxification process going on here. We know that the Tories have had some polling that tells them that they need to look more compassionate. This is a way for them to do that. If they're really serious, I think, there are two things we need to look for. One is, as I say, this Environment Act with the proper targets, timetables, and real legislative weight. And the other is to make sure that there's action on climate change too, because you can talk about plastic for as much as you like, and plastic is a very serious problem to marine animals. But if you're really serious about the health of the oceans, then it's climate change that is warming the oceans, that is bleaching our corals, which is causing mammals to die. And if I can just say that the trouble is we look at the environment, the Conservatives look at the environment in a compartmentalised way. We're talking about the Environment Plan tomorrow. Next week, we may well be talking about a whole new fracking industry that the government wants to unleash.
Okay.
If they do that, it completely undermines their plan.
Stanley, it does seem so far very unambitious to set anything that's 25 years away. I mean, Theresa May won't be held to account then.
2042, I agree, does seem like a long time. 2042, I thought, man, it's 8:45. I thought, but no. I mean, 2042 is a long, long way away, and I think we have to assume that we get quite a lot of action much before that. On the plastics one, I think it's good that she's doing that. I think it's absolutely vital that she takes a comprehensive view.
How can that be good to say we're going to get rid of that in 25 years? I mean,
no,
that's where
that's
we
what
are,
I said.
right?
No, that's the point I'm just
Yeah.
making. I think we have to take a very advanced view of this time.
So she's not doing enough on plastics, really?
Well, at the moment, we're doing the plastic bags, and that's
She could
good.
have done all the plastic bags, couldn't she? She could have done the
Well,
5-piece
that is what
section,
we're
all
now
of them.
planning to do. She is planning to have now a consultation on single-use plastic bottles. Well, tremendously important. But I take Caroline's point. This is not necessarily a left-right issue. The Conservatives, honestly, have been environment. Well, years ago, in 1969, I was the Conservative officer on the environment in the Conservative Research Department. We did take it seriously, and by the way, we won the election in 1970, so I think they're dead right.
But you'd agree that you can't divorce, as Caroline Lucas was saying, you can't divorce climate change and fracking from what you're trying to do for 25 years on pollution of the
Completely right. The
environment.
problem is every time Caroline and I meet together, we always agree with each other.
You agree with me. I'm not sure I always agree
of
with
course
you.
you agree with
because
me.
Do you
the other
think
thing I
his
want to talk
politics
about-
are a barrier to helping the environment, or do you think Stanley Johnson and the Conservative Party can work on this, can actually solve it?
Well, look, Stanley has a real reputation for having done excellent work on the environment in the past. Where I would disagree with him right now is that he has done this extraordinary U-turn on his position on Brexit. He used to be alongside me. He set up Environmentalists for Europe. He's got a great track record in Europe of working on the environment. He's now adopting Brexit. If he does that, that is going to
Hold on,
massively
Caroline.
undermine the environment
What I'm
protection.
assuming tomorrow in this speech which Mrs. Pearce is going to make, I'm assuming she's going to say that part of the environment plan is actually to take over into UK law the whole raft of EU environmental legislation. And not only that, I think she is going to say that she's going to have an enforcement agency to do what actually the Commission and the ECJ.
She had a chance to vote for that when we had an amendment. I put an amendment to the EU withdrawal bill, absolutely setting that out, and it was not supported
We
by
started by
Conservatives.
talking about the ideology of the environment and who had, if you like, the right to it. Would you agree, Caroline, that the biggest friend to the environment actually in recent years has been the Daily Mail? They did all the work against microbeads, against plastic bag tax, plastics in sea pollution. This is tomorrow's head. I don't know if you can see it. Mail, End the Plastic Scourge. They've done more to help the cause, arguably, than the Greens have.
No, there I think you're going a bit too far. I will take your point that they do some very good consumer campaigns, but again, my
But that's
point
what it's
remains,
about, isn't it? That you
no,
have
it's
to
more
go
than
middle
about
ground.
that. You have to do both. You have to get people on board with understandable, specific campaigns, but you have to address the structural difficulties too. And for as long as the Daily Mail, the Conservatives are promoting more and more of the same kind of economic growth, we're not going to have the systemic change we need. We can't just simply bolt on environment, business as usual. We have to change the way we do business.
And if Conservatives had to choose between economic growth and environmental concerns, you know that economic growth would always come first.
Well, one of the problems in this whole area is that one of the reasons we are forcing ourselves down the economic growth route is, of course, the constantly expanding population of this country. And you can't ignore that. And we're going up to 70 million now, with 80 million in prospect. So my view is that we ought to actually aim for stability as far as population is concerned, and stability as far as economic growth is concerned.
That's not going to be a government policy, is it?
Well, years ago I wrote that, and I think it needs to happen.
But let's just really look at some practical things right now. HS2, as you just said, when it comes to something like that, when push comes to shove, when some economic gains, massively overestimated, I have to say, are put on one side and the environment on the other, it's the economy that always wins out. We've got an announcement likely tomorrow about planting more trees. That's great. HS2 is going to destroy around, or at least threaten around 35 ancient woodlands. There is no joined-up thinking
I think
here.
one of my sons is now responsible for HS2 as the Minister
Well, have a word with
of
him.
State, so I'm going to have a word. But I think the real issue now is Britain's overseas role and our global role. And I think that's what Mrs May is going to talk about. We can actually take a leading role internationally now. Forests, plastic pollution, climate change, and I would put in wildlife, biodiversity, crucial areas.
Thank you both very much indeed. Thanks for coming.